When I started this Christmas market, I knew it was going to be long, but I don't think I fully understood what 9 days in a row would actually feel like, physically, emotionally, and also for my small business. In part 1, I took you behind the scenes and showed you what the market looked like. Today, I want to talk about what actually happened, what sold, what didn't sell as well, how much I made, how I kept my shelves full, or somewhat full, and why this market changed how I think about both my plushies and my candles and my whole business. Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Veronica and I sell both handmade plushies and candles. And today I wanted to talk about what my 9-day market was actually like, take you all the way behind the scenes, talk about what happened, the things that interest you, and yeah, of course, also what sold and how much I made at this market. So if you're new here, I actually do markets quite a lot, and especially Christmas markets are my main type of markets that I do, but I've never really done anything like the one that I did last year, which was 9 days in a row. So that was completely different from anything else I had ever done for markets. Usually most of my markets that I do are on the weekends or like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, because I do work Monday through Thursday. So I usually don't do any markets during the week. So that was a first for me. So the market that I did had kind of like an interesting concept. So it started mid-November. I was actually there for the start because you were able to sign up weekly for this market. So it started, I think, November 14th, and you could sign up for the first weekend, which I did. So I did the Friday and the Saturday that the market first opened, and I have a vlog about that on my channel as well. That was my first Christmas market, and then the Sunday of that week was closed, so that was why the first week of the market was only 2 days, and then the vendors switched out weekly, and I personally came back for the last time slot, which was longer than a week. So it was Monday, December 15th, all the way until Tuesday, the 23rd, and they kind of combined the last 2 slots into one big slot. So you were either able to sign up for 9 days or not take the last time slot at all. So I decided to take the plunge and do 9 days in a row. So we had a whole week and then 2 days, which was obviously very, very different than a weekend market and required a whole lot of different organization and all of that because, as I said, I do work during the week. So what I did do was I took Monday and Tuesday off. So the first 2 days of the market, I was off of work, completely focusing on the market because on Monday we were setting up. So I set up by myself, but me and all of the other vendors that were coming in for this time slot set up. So I had to take that day off. And then I had enough holiday days left from work that I was able to take Tuesday off as well, but not Wednesday and Thursday. So those 2 days I ended up working in the morning all the way until like 3:30-ish, and then head out to the market and start selling my things at 4. So that was kind of crazy, and I kind of planned it out beforehand. So I was able to block my time in the afternoons, so I was able to leave work early enough. But what I didn't expect was that actually on my way to the market, so it's like half an hour away from my house, and I was working from home those 2 days so that I could like leave and go to the market as quickly as possible. But I didn't expect that exactly in a week where I was at the market, they actually started doing some construction on the highway that I had to take to go to the market. So it was like jammed like crazy. And the first day when I was setting up, I actually ended up running kind of late. So that was super stressful. But I was also able to like scout the whole situation of the construction going on. So I ended up taking an alternative route to the market every day. So that added around 15 more minutes to my travel time, which I didn't know that I would need. So I was always running late, especially the first few days until I was off of work and could focus on the market wholly. So during that first week, I ended up being very late to the market every single day. So I think the earliest I was there after like that first Monday when we were setting up, I was like on Tuesday, I came right at 4, even though I had the day off, but it ended up taking me such a long time to get to the market. And then Wednesday, Like Tuesday evening, I spoke to my mom, and Wednesday she took over, I think, for like the first hour or so that I had a little more time to actually head out to the market and yeah, do my work as well in the morning so that I could get everything done. She ended up taking over for an hour. Like she left her work early and she works like right around that part of town, so it was easier for her to be there quickly. So she took over the first hour, and then I got to the market and took over from her again, like at 5 or so. So that was awesome. And then on Thursday, by that time, I really knew my market booth neighbors really well because we were set up in like these tiny tents with 6 vendors each, and we had a lot of time, of course, to chat and really get to know each other. So on Thursday, like on Wednesday evening, I told my booth neighbor that I might be running a little late, and if she was able to like turn on my lights already for me and like kind of look around and check that nothing gets stolen. And she was very happy to do that. She is a full-time business owner, so she was there on time, and she kind of like watched my booth for I think like 15 minutes. I was running slightly late because of the whole like traffic situation, and I couldn't leave work any earlier than I had planned to. So yeah, that was a very, very stressful situation to work in the morning and do that market starting at 4 because it was kind of early for me. Usually I work until 5 at least. And yeah, that was super stressful. And then come Friday, that was the last day that I actually vlogged at the market. So you kind of saw a little bit of footage there. Then like on Friday, the market became a whole different situation. Honestly, already like during the week, it was way busier than I had expected during the week. So we ended up doing quite well during the week already. But then Friday and the weekend, it got so crazy that I ended up having a really low stock at my booth and having to restock so much, not only just plushies. I kind of expected that part, that I would be running low on plushies after a little while, but then my candles got super popular, like starting kind of like Thursday, Friday-ish. My candles started to sell so well, and I had quite a lot of stock made for that. So I honestly expected that I wouldn't need to make any more for like during the market, but they ended up running so low that I got home on Friday evening and the market ended at 10 every night. So I got home kind of like 10:30, almost 11-ish, and I started making candles for a couple hours Friday night, and I did the same on Saturday. Luckily, before I started this market, I had poured so many vessels because I do hand make my vessels as well, and I had prepped so many of those before my market. So I was able to make around like 200-ish more candles, and that was so good and helped my booth feel a little more full when I started running low on plushies. But I will talk about that a little more later when we talk about actual numbers and everything. But yeah, in the end, I think I got home on the last day with like 20 or so candles left. So it was such a good thing to be able to restock those as well, which also meant that I had less time to prep plushies Friday and Saturday evening. So we ended up running super low on those. So yeah, definitely inventory was such a struggle this year, and I learned so much about that, but we will talk about that a little later as well, about like what I take away from this market. So before we get into the numbers, let's just talk about expectations that I had for this market, because I had done the market when it was first starting out, so the first 2 days, and I also did this market last year, but also like for the first time slot, but that was 3 days last year. I feel like I already knew this market quite well when I started my long time slot there, but in the end it turned out so different. The, I guess, third time, but the second time I was there this year than I had expected, because the first time I was there, the first 2 days, it was still quite a long time to go until Christmas, because it was like in the middle of November, so people were like not really focused on buying Christmas gifts the first time around. I think the first time around there were actually quite a lot of people there, which kind of surprised me back then, and it was actually quite busy, and I did pretty well there. But the first time around, I ended up selling mostly plushies, and I think only like 20 or 25% of my revenue came from candles. So I kind of went into the second part of the market expecting it to kind of go like the same way and people being way more interested in my plushies and not so much my candles. But the second time I was there, actually people were also really into the candles. So I haven't done the breakdown yet because I didn't want to spoil myself, and I kind of want to like have a first reaction to the actual breakdown of this market when I film this for you guys. So I don't know how the revenue split was the second time around, but I think I actually made more revenue from candles than plushies the second time around, which might be because I was running low on plushies, but I was also running low on candles, so they were also pretty popular. So that kind of surprised me that the types of items that people were interested in kind of also switched with the two market time slots. So that was very interesting. And then also what really surprised me, I think I talked about that in part one when I was actually taking footage at the market. My expectations, like during the week, it was like always from 4 to 10. So 6 hours of market. And I thought like at least in the first couple of days of this market, it would be a good evening to make 300 euros every night. And let me just say, I surpassed that every single night, even during the week. So my revenue expectations were actually way lower than what I ended up making. So I'm really, really glad and grateful that this market went so well. And yeah, that my expectations were absolutely blown out of the waters. But let me stop yapping. Let me look and find my notebook and let's get into some actual numbers. Okay, so you might be able to tell that it's become a little darker. That is because I just did a little bit of calculations for my market. So I went ahead and went through the numbers in my notebook. So this is what I use to like track what I sell at my markets. And just to show you, this is how many pages I filled at my 9-day market. So I think it's like 1, 2, 15 whole pages. So quite a lot to get through. So that is why it took a little while. And I wanted to get into the numbers, but I wanted to start out with my plushies because I just calculated all of that out for the whole time. So let me get into that. And I can't really give you best sellers at this market because basically everything I had left over from the markets before that one sold. So I sold out of everything. I had a couple of larger plushies left from my previous winter markets that didn't get a lot of attention. Most notably my 2 dogs. I will try and put pictures up here if I have any. I had 2 big dogs that I had set up on like the top of my display, and they stayed for a little while. I think the first sold on like Thursday or so. I would have to check, but it took a couple of days to sell the first one, or it might have been Friday, and then the second one sold on the weekend. So they kept me company for a little while. I also had my little panda that was laying down. That one was the last big plushie that I sold. I also had the candy corn triceratops that I sold. So a couple of bigger plushies left that I ended up selling out of during the market, and I pretty much sold everything else as well, and I tried to remake as much as I could, which is why I know exactly what the best sellers were, because during the market I was running so low on stock that I decided to not make a whole wide range of plushies anymore for the remaining days, but I focused on 3 types of plushies that I mostly made for each day, which were my chubby birds, so chicks, penguins, and mallards. And I kept remaking those for every single day because I was able to work on the bodies for those at the market and just stuff them at home and take them to the market the next day. So I ended up making around 10 of those every single day to have them at the market again, which is why they are in my bestsellers, of course. So chicks I sold 13 of, mallards I sold 16 of, and penguins I sold 43 of. So quite a lot there. But as I said, I made like 10 every single day and had them at my market every single day. So that is why the numbers are so high for those. And then the other two types of plushies that I made were baby whales and baby octos, because same thing, I was able to make them at the market, like the octos especially, I was able to make at the market and just add eyes, stuff them and close them up, which is really quick work back at home to have a large number of those again for the next day. And whales are just like the quickest plushie to make, so I ended up making quite a lot of those as well, and that is why they are on my best-selling list. So the numbers for those two are kind of crazy. For my baby whales, I ended up selling 69 of those over the course of the 9 days, and then for the baby octos, I ended up selling 96 of them, so almost 100 of them, which is kind of crazy, and why I really need to make so many of those for this year, because they are just so popular. And even when I had a lot of mini plushies, that was the type of plushie that people gravitated towards, so that is why I was really glad that I was able to focus on them as well and sell them throughout the market. So those were the best sellers in terms of plushies. But as I said, I think a lot of plushies would have sold if I had any more. In the first couple of days when I still had quite a lot of my inventory, cats were also such a big seller. I ended up selling so many in the first couple of days, but I wasn't really able to keep up with the stock for those. But I think if I had unlimited amount of plushies, I think the cats would have been in the best-selling list, as well as the turtles. They were so popular as well in the first couple of days, so I would definitely make more of those for the next time to have them for longer. And yeah, I looked at the total amount that I made just in plushies alone, because after that we will look at candles as well. But in plushies alone, I ended up making 2,905 euros just from plushies, and with very limited supply. So I think if I had more, I could have easily made double the amount, I think, because I was running so low on everything. I think with unlimited plushie supply, I could have made so much more on plushies. Overall, I'm really happy with the amount of stock that I was able to keep in my booth for plushies, because that is really difficult at a long market like that. So as I said, I kept crocheting when I was at the market, as I usually do, and then I just basically finished up the plushies, especially like during the week when I actually had to work in the morning. I didn't really have a ton of time to prep additional plushies than what I had made at the market the previous day. So I basically just focused on finishing up the plushies that I started at the market, and that ended up being around like 200 to 300 euros worth of plushies every single day that I was able to restock, which is pretty good, I think. And the most stressful day was coming from Friday to Saturday, because Friday the market ended at 10, but on Saturday and Sunday the market started earlier. So during the week it started at 4, but on Saturday I think it started at noon, and then on Sunday it started at 11. So quite long hours for the weekend. And I was a little stressed coming home Friday, because I knew I had more time at the market the next day. Almost no plushies left, almost no candles left, and yeah, not a lot of time to prep, but a lot of time to sell the next day. So that was the most stressful day, I think, to prep plushies. But yeah, as I said, I focused on the 3 types of plushies that I was able to quickly restock. Towards the end of the market, I ended up making a couple more cats and a big brontosaurus, which also sold pretty quickly. So I had a couple of bigger plushies again towards the end of the week. So from Sunday to Monday, I had a little more time to prep, because Monday the market started at 4 again. So it gave me a lot more time in the morning to work on a couple bigger plushies. So yeah, that was pretty good. And I'm sorry if you can hear any construction going on. There's an office space getting renovated like right next to my studio, so I'm sorry if you can hear that. Those were the numbers for the plushies. And then, as I said, for the candles, they were also pretty popular, especially like on the weekend when the plushie stock started running low. And I actually am so surprised that so much of my revenue came from plushies. I would have expected it to be less, but it seems like I actually had quite a good stock in plushies. I wouldn't have thought that I would have made 2,900 euros from plushies alone, because I didn't think I had this much stock that I had brought with me. Something else that sold pretty well were my scrunchies. I have these like satin scrunchies that I made over a year ago, and I just took them to my market because I knew that my stock was running low, and I ended up selling 16 of them, which is quite a lot for filler items like them. And yeah, let's actually get into some of the actual numbers. So I also did that. That is why it took me such a long time to do the breakdown for this market. So I broke down every single day how many orders I got and the revenue of the market day. So let's go through it. Let's start with the first day, Monday the 15th. So that was actually my lowest sales day and also my lowest revenue day, which I think is very motivating that it only got better from there. So on Monday, we got 28 orders and 373 euros in revenue. So that was pretty good for a Monday evening, I think. And then on Tuesday, we ended up doing 34 orders and 428 euros in revenue. On Wednesday, we ended up doing 29 orders, so a couple less than Tuesday, but the revenue was exactly the same, so 428 euros for that. I think the revenue always got like a little higher when I sold a couple more candles because they're just a higher price point, so the revenue gets higher with fewer orders when I sell more candles, if that makes sense. So kind of like the same thing on Thursday. We ended up doing 30 orders but making 551 euros, which is crazy for like during the week where people were still working. So yeah, I remember I got home that night and I was actually pretty excited about the weekend, a little scared because of like the whole stock situation, but mostly excited because that is like, if I make that at a normal market day, it's like an all right day. But yeah, it was during the week. It was before the busy weekend was about to start. So I knew it was going to be a long and good weekend. And then Friday, we did 38 orders and made 573 euros. So not a whole lot more than the day before. Kind of like similar. And then we are on the weekend. The days were much longer on Saturday and Sunday. So Saturday we ended up having the best day of the whole market. I did 66 orders and I made 1,305 euros, which is such good revenue. So I was so excited about that, and I basically had nothing left. At least that's what it felt like at my booth. So such a crazy Saturday. It was so busy, so many people shopping. And then on Sunday, it was a little slower, but still pretty busy. So we did 63 orders and made 1,144 euros. Then Monday and Tuesday, the final 2 days before Christmas, were shorter days again, but I think a lot of people were off of work, so it was consistently very busy. Monday the 22nd we did 28 orders again, which was the same as the first Monday, but the revenue was much higher because I had almost no plushies left, so I sold quite a lot more candles, which means we made 578 euros. And then the last day, the Tuesday, I didn't really know if it was going to be like pretty busy or not busy at all because it was the last day before Christmas. So I thought maybe most people had their Christmas shopping already done and wouldn't be shopping around and more interested in like food and drink vendors. But still, we ended up doing 31 orders and making 581 euros. Such a busy market, and I came home with almost nothing left. So I think I did the best that I could have done with the amount of inventory I had. As I've been saying, I wish I had more inventory. I think I did a pretty good job doing something like this for the first time. I think inventory wise, I did a pretty good job. For the future, I would know how to prep better for a market like this. But yeah, overall, we ended up making almost 6,000 euros in revenue, which is crazy and such a big deal for my little business. And yeah, we sold 517 items in total, which is crazy and such a high number. So overall, such a crazy experience, and it taught me so much about doing markets, running my business and everything. And actually it made me think about what I want to do with my business in this new year. And that is one of the reasons why I haven't signed up for as many markets as I did last year. So for now, I've planned out my market year all the way until the end of June, and I only have 2 market weekends planned, which is way less than last year. But I learned from this market that I want to focus on fewer shows but bigger ones and more profitable ones for me, and those were by far my Christmas markets, and especially this one and the one I did before that. They were crazy busy and crazy good for my business, so that is why I decided to really step back on spring shows this year. Only 4 market days until the end of June, really prepping so much and focusing on the market season from October until the end of December, because that is really where most of the people are shopping around for gifts and like supporting small businesses and all of that. So that is one thing that I've learned from this experience. And I also asked you guys last week if you had any questions for me. And one of the questions I got asked the most is, would I ever do something like this again? And honestly, I really would. I am planning to go back to this market this year and signing up for like the same time slot again, which would now be 10 days instead of 9, because Christmas will be Thursday, not Wednesday, so it would be even a day longer. So that is very exciting. I'm also planning to prep so much more for this year's season, which hopefully will be possible because I'm doing less shows earlier on in the year, so I have more time to prep for the big shows at the end of the year. At least that is my plan for now. The market experience was so positive. I had so much fun with the other vendors. I'm so excited to get back into prepping for such events. So yeah, that was my first long market experience, and I think it has changed me for the future and has made me very excited to do more markets like this in the future. So if you're interested in market prep, markets, crochet, plushies, all of that, make sure to follow along and stay tuned for the next video, which will probably be a market prep because I have so much prepping to do for my big plans this year. And thank you guys so much for watching this video all the way until the end, and I will see you guys again next week for another video. So until then, bye!